Hello, my name is Alex Isles and welcome to Ad Gefrin in Northumberland, up here in Yeovering. And I'm standing in the Grandstand building at Ad Gefrin. Now the Grandstand was an amazing structure that existed on this site, and this Grandstand fits into the tradition of Roman amphitheatres in Britain and in Gaul during the Roman period. But one of the things that makes it so special is that it is discovered in an Anglo-Saxon, early Anglo-Saxon context up here in Northumberland, which makes it one of the most mysterious buildings right up here on the site. So I'm standing where the speaking platform was thought to be. It was a almost rectangular site location, and what they've done is this summer they've actually taken a lawnmower and they've cut into the ground the location of where all of the different parts of the site would have been. So I'm standing on a speaking platform where a speaker or a throne would have been sat so that someone could address a crowd. All the way around where this platform was, there were panels placed in the ground. This was seen by a line of posts that would have basically created almost like a windshield on either side and behind, that would therefore then take my voice and help it to be projected out towards the audience. Then directly in front of me, there are 6 lines initially of these large wide trench posts where large beams of wood were placed into the ground here and then here and then here for 6 rows, and that created the original grandstand. When it created the original grandstand, Brian Hope Taylor basically figured out that there would have been a wooden platform built on top of these, creating an open-air seating space, not dissimilar to sort of like an open-air theatre or an amphitheatre late in the Roman period. It's not an amphitheatre, by the way, it's a grandstand. It's slightly different in design, but has a lot of inspiration from that period. So when you have the seating, they reckoned that by logic of every single person having 2 foot of space, you could fit 160 people onto this. So 160 people would sit down to be able to hear the central speaker at that location. Then this was built in phase 2, but slightly later on at the end of phase 3C in the Archaeology. So slightly later on, this is when Brian Hope Taylor thought that Edwin had died, and then at the end of Edwin's death the site is burnt to the ground and the new King Oswald comes along. That was his actual chronology of the site. They then add rows 7 through 9 into this site here. And so when they add 7 through 9, these are quite interesting, and I'll speak about why they're slightly different. This then boosts the amount of seating in the amphitheatre or the grandstand right up to possibly about 320 individuals. So you've suddenly got way more people able to sit on it. It's repaired, it's expanded, and it's a location where people are gathering together to hear and to basically listen to a singular individual. Now, some people have connected this back to the Icelandic or Scandinavian concept of a thing, and this is almost like a Viking parliament or an Anglo-Saxon parliament that we see from the Germanic peoples in the sort of early Middle Ages. But one of the things I would say that makes this different to the idea of a thing is that you've got a single individual standing here. You've got, or maybe even at most, 3 people. And when they're standing here, they are presenting to the people sat on the grandstand. The people on the grandstand, they may be able to stand up and speak back or something like that, but the way it's set out is for people to hear what the person sat here is saying or stood here is saying, because the screens are designed to amplify the sound of this person. So this person is presenting, and it's almost like a one-way system of communication. The information is coming from here, going to there, and it's not designed easily for the people to give their information or feedback. This is very much a one-way, sort of like a very authoritarian, very structured site right here. And so when it's structured, I think this is where maybe a royal person or a king would sit. And if you think of the kings like Ealhswith, Edwin, Oswald, these kings of Northumbria, these are very authoritarian characters who have then got their chief lords. They're gathering in together. They've come from all over Northumbria. When they've gathered here, they've come to hear what the king's going to say. This is for law making, this is for giving out laws, this is for basically instructing people and gathering information as well. And it's also a place of taxation, which we'll come to with the Great Enclosure in another video shortly. So the Great Enclosure's over there. They've brought down their cattle tax, they've brought their dues, and they're paying them to the king right here. He's gathering his resources to this site here at Ad Gefrin. So the king is sat here and is presenting the information. I can almost imagine during the reign of Oswald, when it's expanded, Oswald sitting here and Aidan, his priest, who is Irish, preaching in the Irish language, and then Oswald is translating it into Anglo-Saxon so his lords can hear the Christian message. And that's something again we get from Bede. Bede mentions this, the English historian Bede. So we're presuming again this could have been used for that, but again I see this as a king's place for laws, for tradition, for strength and that sort of thing. The reason we know it was expanded again is to do with the history of the site. So at one point, at the end of what Brian Hope Taylor called Phase 3C, there was a fire that destroyed the entirety of the site. Or at least most of it, and the grandstand here was damaged because at one point someone had put brushwood or some sort of kindling against the side of the grandstand and had been burnt. When it had been burnt, it was then repaired and then extended. So that's why we see this greater, larger grandstand structure right here. The way it was designed is that just behind where the throne is, there's a really interesting point right here, which is also being cut out of the ground just around here. And there was another freestanding post. That freestanding post could have actually been maybe another totem. I could almost imagine it having a goat's head on top, as I've mentioned in the previous video. Ad Gefrin means the place of goats. So this could be a totemic pole here, or a symbol that would have been connected to the power of the speaker or the king right here. So the king sat here, then we've got the post behind him, but the whole of the grandstand is actually measured off that post. So through a series of cord or like twine and rope, you could then lay out and then put out pegs for the locations of exactly where you would need each of the posts to be placed to build this grandstand. And so the original 6 rows are all lined up with that, but when they add 7 through 9, they are not lined up symmetrically with that post. So we know that that post wasn't visible or couldn't be lined out with a cord and line because there was still enough of the grandstand standing that it was in the way. But the original 6 rows are all set out perfectly so that it corresponds to that post right there, what was called post E and Brian Hope Taylor's excavations, so that this was symmetrical and perfectly lined out. And so the extension makes it less symmetrical, but again it shows extra capacity and need for a greater number of people to be sitting here listening to the power of the royal figure who is in this site right here. And I find that fantastic because it shows an organization that you wouldn't imagine necessarily amongst this period of the Dark Ages, when we're thinking of warlords and how they're depicted in films as these scruffy barbarians with fur on them and stuff like that. And you know, a building like this throws that out of the window. Get rid of that fort, get rid of it now. Instead, think of a very structured clan or tribal based society in some ways, but it's still got a lot of Roman influence. This building comes out of a Roman influence, and there is someone still with the building experience or knowledge of Roman construction that is able to actually come up to this area of Northumbria outside of what was the Roman Empire and build something so that a single speaker right here can address an entire audience, speak to them, address them, say to them, right, this is what we're going to do, this is my royal authority, and then give out his law and order to these individuals. And apparently this, Brian Hope Taylor put this within the pagan kings period. So like Aelfrith, who has become Bretwald, or High King of all Britain, it's built in what Brian Hope Taylor thought was his period. And so when you've got Aelfrith's kingdom, that king, he's actually going and speaking to all these people. You could imagine sub-kings from other British kingdoms coming and having to hear him here. You're thinking of the Thanes and the other Anglo-Saxon lords gathering here, and his retainers as well. Edwin is then using it when he's King of Northumbria, and then it's expanded, if you use Brian Hope Taylor's chronology, during the period of Oswald. So High King of Oswald, who is now this powerful Christian king, is speaking here and possibly even converting his kingdom with Aidan from the help of the monastery of Iona, and also Lindisfarne as well, his new plant monastery off the northeast coast. And so this grandstand right here, I find it such an amazing building, because again it throws out that idea of the Dark Ages and instead shows an organised, structured society that is listening to royal authority and is being able to having that royal authority communicated to these people. And this is the only structure of its kind up here in northern Britain, or at least in the British Isles that we know of from the Dark Ages. And so again we have this amazing thing where this building, which you'd think is impossible to be built during this time because of the idea of the loss of technology, the loss of information during the after the Roman period, is still being built in a wild space north of the Roman frontier, in a place that could be thought of as barbarian territory. This place that was Iron Age Britain but now has become Anglo-Saxon, and you have that mixing of cultures up here. But there's obviously someone who's been able to come up to this location and still continue to build, continue to influence that old Roman way of doing things, but under a new authority. And I can almost imagine this post right here, which may have started off as a totem pole of this Germanic totem pole, being replaced during the time of Oswald with a Celtic cross. So the king's authority comes from God, whereas before, the previous pagan kings, maybe that would have been a statue representing Wodan, the Anglo-Saxon version of Odin, or possibly a goat totem representing the spirit of this area here, the place of goats, Ad Gefrin. But there's so many different things that we could draw from this, could theorize, but we have to look at the archaeology and bring ourselves back down to home and just go, there is a grandstand here, which is a place of authority coming out from this point. As you can see, I've really quite enjoyed this video, and I hope you have as well. If you would like to, please do like and subscribe, put a comment below and I'll try and answer your questions there. And if you'd like to have a Patreon as well, which you can use to support me. In the meantime though, stay safe and well, and I hope you'll join me for another video in the near future. Thank you very much.